Hi everyone, good evening. Thanks for coming. My name is Jens Andermann. I'm a professor of Spanish and Portuguese over at NYU down the road, where I often teach film. First of all, thanks to the Latin American Film Center for arranging this screening almost for the 25th anniversary of La Ciénaga. I remember when I first saw it in November 2001 at the ICA in London, and a month or so later, the whole country was on fire. More on that later. So it's quite a moment to rescreen La Ciénaga and revisit it today, especially since Lucrecia just presented her most recent work, Nuestra Tierra, here at I think it premiered here at the New York Film Festival. So it's a great moment to revisit her first feature-length film. So enjoy La Ciénaga. There's going to be a short Q&A after the movie, so if you want to stay, you're very welcome too, and we can have questions, opinions, and so forth. So enjoy the movie. We can go from there. So La Ciénaga, the Swamp, was, as I said before, first released in 2001. And at the time, interestingly, it was received very much as a kind of raw, unfiltered portrayal of a country in terminal crisis, and as a film that inaugurated, together with a couple of others, you may remember movies like Pizza Virafaso, Mundo Grua, Crane World, or La Libertad, Freedom, which are all from around that same time, or maybe even the same year, 2001. And in hindsight, really, one has to say that La Ciénaga, and probably also many of these other films, are much more complex than that. No, it's a much more multi-layered meditation on the much longer standing, sedimented colonial relations that underwrite this crisis, right? And that is really a theme that Lucrecia Martel has remained faithful to really throughout her entire career, right up to her most recent film, Nuestra Tierra, Our Land, which likewise, or even more explicitly, moves from the present, from a kind of courtroom drama where it's a documentary about the trial of three white miners who murdered an indigenous land rights activist. But the movie goes from there to the much longer, centuries-long histories of dispossession, of ethnocide, of de-indigenization that, as you see, are constantly present, but also constantly disavowed in La Ciénaga. And it's really noteworthy how the maybe two most singular voices, the two most singular filmmakers to come out of that generation of new Argentine cinema, and I'm talking of Lucrecia on the one hand, of Lisandro Alonso on the other, have both in their most recent films similarly kind of pivoted first to the colonial past. Lucrecia Martel with Sama, of course, and Lisandro Alonso with Jauja. And then in their most recent films, Nuestra Tierra, Lucrecia's film, which premiered this year, and Eureka, Lisandro's most recent work, which also premiered at the New York Film Festival 2 years ago. Both of them directly focus on indigenous struggles of land rights, of cultural survivance right now in the present. And that's kind of remarkable when one thinks of these two filmmakers really marking since their very debut movies, La Ciénaga, The Swamp for Lucrecia, and La Libertad, Freedom for Lisandro, the kind of opposite extremes or poles of new Argentine cinema. No, between those two extremes, kind of a new Argentine cinema unfolded over the following years, with Lisandro's aesthetics very much this very minimalist stripping down of narrative to its absolutely bare bones of a sort of lone male character on the outer edges of the social world, the river, the forest, and that's really all that is happening. There's not even much speech in these movies. And here we have this, no, as you've seen, this completely orchestral or tapestry pattern of dozens of threads of plot lines that refuse to cohere into kind of one single cause effect storyline, and urge us, no, rather than to run with a story that goes from beginning to end, to kind of hang with the multiple situations in this film, no, to, as Donna Haraway would put it, to stay with the trouble that is constantly there. And if La Ciénaga really refuses to succumb to narrative progress, and that I think is both a filmic poetics and it's also a political message and statement. No, it's a filmic poetics because, as you've seen in the film, there's lots of shots with very shallow focus length, no, that only allows us to really identify what goes on in part of the image, but there's sort of ominous things going on elsewhere, and there's then also a lot of off-screen or acousmatic sound where we don't know the source of sound, and that creates a sort of ominous or uncanny situation. And that means that many shots and sequences are essentially unfinished and open to multiple combinations because, no, the images in themselves are not closed on themselves. Multiple combinations that are not consecutive, that are not cause-effect relations, but that are also not necessarily metaphorical or allegorical combinations, no, that bring us from one shot or one sequence to the next. Instead, we have this this lack of narrative progression, no, in the sense of a conflict that unfolds up to its very climax. We find ourselves in front of a kind of experience that really remains stuck, or literally, no, swamped like the cow that the boys find in the forest at the beginning of the film, that is incapable of changing or even of moving out of its own means, like Tali and Mecha, no, who never actually get to Bolivia. So how does change actually occur in this film, or how is it imagined by the characters? There's two ways actually how change outside a sort of historical change is possible in this film, and it's on the one hand the miracle, and on the other hand the accident. No? That is what kind of moves time forward in this film. The miraculous promise, on the other hand, on the one hand, no, of redemption through the Virgin that apparently appeared on the tank, and then its appearance on the TV screen remains always imminent, but always frustrated and kind of passed on. An apparition, interestingly, that is associated very closely with this class, race, gender-bending relationship that Momi has to the maid, to Isabel, no? Because that's where we start seeing the plot of the Virgin when they're both in bed together and eating peanuts, and there's this slightly erotic situation. And of course, that situation then ends with the accidental pregnancy of Isabel and her having to leave. And on the other hand, we have the whole series of near-fatal accidents that kind of go on right until the fatal fall, the death of Luciano at the end of the film. But neither of these, neither the miracle nor the accident, is able to redeem the family, the community in any way. No, there's no tragic catharsis of any kind with this final moment. There's just a cruel absurdity of a child's death, of irreparable loss. But also the miracle, of course, never materializes. No, either before the TV cameras or at the very end when Momi actually goes to see for herself, and the film ends on this note. There was nothing there to see. And this experience, I think, no, of on the one hand a miracle that refuses constantly to materialize, and of a loss without catharsis. That's really the experience that even 25 years after the film's first screening, Argentinians are once again all too familiar with today, and that's why the film, I think, is so relevant still as both a filmic masterpiece, but also as a political commentary on the present of Argentina then and now. That's where I would leave it. So those of you who have a question or want to go back to a particular point can do so. I don't know if we have a microphone, but I guess I can hear. Okay, we do have a microphone. Okay, there's a question here. Do we? Maybe I'll give you my microphones.
I'm from Argentina, so I left 50 years ago. But this part of the country is totally unknown to me. This is the north of Argentina, which always has been extremely underdeveloped. And I was dragging the rest of the country. Like the north of the country is like stuck in the 16th century, and the rest is even. But I don't see the political thing here. I mean, no, it never comes to me as a political thing. Okay. It comes to me, you see the difference between the indigenous people, the cabecitas, as they call them there, and the white people. You see the relationship they have with that. You can see that. But the more serious issue, the center, is the kind of a decadence of the family, you know? The degradation in which they live, the family, and the lack of communication, the lack of empathy between themselves. It's like,
yeah,
I don't know. It reminds me of another movie. I don't know which it is. Maybe it's some Pasolini thing. You know?
Okay. Maybe you remember, but I'll try to answer that. I think that's the very point. So it's not a political thing in the sense of a film that denounces something sort of. No, there's no kind of outright political message in the way that probably in Nuestra Tierra, in the more recent film, there is, and yet all the relations, and I would say both the familial relations and the social relations, are completely infused by politics. That's the very thing, that the politics is so naturalized that we don't see it as political, but both the way that this family, generations and generations that repeat kind of the same patriarchal pattern of kind of just sinking and sinking and sinking. At the same time as they cannot establish any other relationship with the outer world than this completely racist and sexist relationship of an animalizing relationship, with the population, which is on the one hand indigenized and de-indigenized, because they're not necessarily all indigenous, but to call somebody Indio is kind of to establish this naturalized social hierarchy that is around all the time, and that all the characters fall into. That's so interesting. It's not just the characters that we clearly don't sympathize with, Mecha and Gregorio, but also Tali, who is kind of much more the person that we go with, and we kind of share her sorrow, but she also falls immediately into this language of a subdued racism, and that I think is what is about the politics in this film. And thank you for your question, because one thing I forgot to say is that this film and the two next movies that she made, La Niña Santa and La Mujer Sin Cabeza, are all set in Salta, so it's a particular part of Argentina where maybe this kind of colonial, the presence of the colonial is even stronger than in other parts of the country, because it's kind of on the old route of where the silver was transported from the mines of Potosí down to the port of Buenos Aires. So it's really a deep-seated kind of colonial relation or web of power relations that we find in that part of the country.
Well, I want to say something. The decadence of the family makes it seem that actually there is not a big difference in between the two worlds, the world of the white people and the indigenous people. It made me think to another film, a very famous film from Bolivia. I don't remember the director. Is Cartagena's Brother, and it's about racism. It's really hard on racism, but as a white person, you see that movie and you cannot recognize who are the whites and who are the browns because everybody is mestizo. And in this case, I think it also there is something like that because these worlds like work together and there is not a huge difference between them. It's like a dance that everybody digs into this system of belief, and everybody repeats the same stories, the virgin, the pregnancy, the friendship, the relationships. Everything is a dance. And for me, the last phrase is actually the hope, the breakage of the dance. I didn't see anything. Pragmatism, reality, materialism.
Thank you, yeah. Great point. That's how my friend David Ubiña, great film critic in Argentina, kind of reads this ending. So you have important supporters there. I don't actually think there is a breakthrough, and that is the very point. Kind of we see the young generation in all its playfulness, and there's different young generations. There's the adolescents, and then there's the younger children. But already we see how this sedimentation of colonial power is happening and seeping even into the way in which the kids relate to each other.
She's a lesbian in love with an indigenous woman.
Who?
That's
Isabel. Yeah, but that relationship doesn't happen. It doesn't come to pass. So of course there is all the time a kind of something that could happen. But the point is, I think, no,
it's not about sex, it's about love.
Maybe it is, but it's something not happening in this film, so to speak. I think there's other questions, so maybe we should take a few questions rather than me talking all the time.
You mentioned Sama, which we screened a few years ago, and of course it takes place in a much more further in the past and an expressly colonial environment. Could you say what you think about compare the two in terms of the way she uses history? I mean, in the later film, it's more present day, but she clearly has an interest in exploring colonial roots, as you say.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. I think to just give a short answer, because Sama is obviously a historical film, with people in sort of period dress, and it's also the adaptation of a novel by Di Benedetto, a great novel, if you haven't read it. The interesting thing is that just as the novel is set in the past, but it kind of invents a literary language that is not of the present, but it's also not kind of the documented language of the 1800s. In much the same way, I think, the film is a historical movie, but is full of anachronisms in the way that people talk, move, and so forth, especially towards the end when they cross the frontier, and then there's the story with the bandits and so forth. So it's on this border between a reflection on the past, but then it's also clearly a sort of imagination of the past. It's also, in a sense, a fantastical movie in many ways. And that's probably where some kind of continuity is in the play with film genres. No, we could say there's a lot of elements in this movie that actually come from horror movies, no, out of screen sound and so forth. And yet it's obviously not a horror movie, but it has kind of things that we easily recognize as, oh yeah, this is almost like a horror movie. And that is something that she does a lot, no? A very sort of film literate play with how film genres, how cinema as a machine of imaginations work. I think over here, no?
We have time for 2 more questions.
Thank you. Sorry. I sniped you there. Yeah, I mean, since this film debuted in the early aughts, there's obviously been a pretty radical shift in the Argentinian political landscape. We have Milei kind of presiding in this post kind of Peronist stagnancy. So I'm wondering if there has been recently or throughout that time a kind of reapprehension of the film. Have you seen an evolution that's kind of coterminous with this trajectory? And then I'm curious if any aspect of the kind of sedimentation, as you mentioned, or the decay and the stagnancy has a critical component to maybe the Argentinian political establishment that had such a long reign and tenure, and more explicitly the Peronists in particular. So sorry, that's a little long-winded, but...
Yeah, I would say in equal measure, if you counted by the years. Both the Peronist kind of leftist populist and the rightist or ultra-rightist populist have been in power for a bit more or a bit less than a decade. And maybe also even in that way, the sort of cyclical way in which crisis seems to happen in Argentina is something that the film is kind of almost prophetic about. I think it's one thing that is interesting in what the film maybe inaugurates, not just in cinema but in Argentinian culture in general, is a turn to non-urban to rural situations, and often written or filmed by women, right? That focus in interesting ways on the new kinds of crises that monoculture, extractivism, environmental degradation, and so forth bring about. And these, again, whoever is in power, that never changes. No, the advance of agro-industry, of mining, and that has kind of worsened exponentially over the years and has been caught by a cinema and a literature of which La Ciénaga is kind of a forerunner, I would say.
Okay, who did we miss before?
I think there were 2 questions over here. Maybe we can take the 2. Oh, no, one in the back.
Sorry. Hi. So yeah, the movie does seem to end in a kind of situation where, yeah, this family, the society is just stuck in this unending trouble, and yeah, that there's no hope. But to me, it also seems like there's this subtle suggestion of like a promise of hope at some point because of the time of the year. It's set in Carnaval, which is the moment where society might be the most chaotic and the most, I don't know, just there's a lot of trouble going on. So maybe in that way it's saying, maybe it's just, yes, it's trying to reflect what's going on in society as a whole, but this is just this one moment where it's pretty bad and it's just a crisis. I don't know if you see it too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that the sort of time in which the narrative time of the film is the time of Carnival. That's why the 2 little girls are always dressed up. And yeah, that obviously is interesting because it is kind of a time of social inversion and upheaval and so forth. No, but the interesting thing is that in general we don't ever see the carnival. We hear it sometimes, no, as in the scene of the drums. So at least the social world in which the film is set remains also impervious to, no, this potential inversion of social roles, at least for the time of the carnival. I think if it's about that, yeah.
You want to say, except for the fight, where like just to compliment, not to bring another thing, but the scene where the brother gets his nose broken happens like at the carnival, and it's one of the most chaotic scenes in general. And I am going to sneak my question in. The heat. I wanted to ask about the heat. I think that it's at least I haven't watched a lot of the Martel's films, but this setting the film in like the north, which is more I don't know, yeah, hot probably than the southern parts of the country. Just made me think a lot about how this whole environment is created around it, and how our perception of the film can be changed if we take into account that everyone is always really hot. Like everyone is like half naked, everyone is sweating all the time, and these like flows of desire that are completely non-normative. Like these interactions are happening, and everyone is looking at each other. There's this interplay, very uncomfortable, of touching and playing and like horsing around, etc. And there's this scene in which the white kids are out hunting, and they start to check the dog. Like, oh, I'm sure that they were doing something to the dog, they were talking to the dog, etc. And I was wondering if that's not us looking at these characters, right, that are in this semi-colonial, semi-savage, semi-16th century context, right? If we are not repeating a little bit that, like, oh, it's you guys that are like doing life and desire wrong, and we are okay. I don't know.
No, absolutely, very cool, and maybe that allows us to end on a slightly more positive note, even, no, because it is a very sweaty film, because it's also not just Salta, but a particular region of Salta de Chungas, which is this sort of arid, wet, forested, subtropical part of the northwest of Argentina, not the Andes, not the dry part. And that means that this is a very erotic movie, not in the sense that there's a lot of sex going on, but that we see a lot of flesh all the time and bodies rubbing up against each other in kind of non-normative contexts, no? Whether it's siblings sort of playing at various kinds of fighting, but also of like schmoozing with one another, whether it's the relationship between Momi and Isabel, or even whether there's this one moment where they all go to the dique, to the artificial lake, and suddenly it's just bodies getting wet and having fun together. So if there's one kind of release valve in this movie, it's obviously the sort of pervasive erotics of this climate which everybody suffers in the same way. No, everybody is exposed to this humid, hot climate, and that kind of means that these bodies are not just like groggy and on beds in various kinds of constellations, but that there is also a sort of potential line of flight there. That is never acted out in the movie, but it's obviously present all the time.
I know the movie, but what actually what happens make it look familiar. It looks very much like Louisiana, like the South here.
Uh-huh.
Okay, it looks like the Cat on the Hat Reef, the movie Cat on the
Hat on a Hot Tin Roof. Right.
That kind of interaction, relationship.
Yeah.
anachronic, but also they coexist different people. They cannot actually separate each other.
Yeah.
And they go nowhere.
Yeah.
It's like
Very good.
It's not the European movie. It's Louisiana. It's like New Orleans.
Very good comparison. You get an A.
Yeah.
I think we'll have to wrap it up here. So thank you very much again for coming.
In the position as viewers, oh no, this cannot end well. And most of the time, there's just a cut and things go on. So nobody heeds the warnings. No. Yeah. That's I think the point. There's warnings all over the place, but yeah, nobody sees them.
Thank you. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Es como un canal Argentina. Nunca la había visto. No la había visto. Le he visto algún canal de Rosario Castellanos. Es que es igual. No. Es tengo mucha. Me pregunto si hay.
Tengo que leer.
Como esta cosa.
Como el relato es.
Es completamente distinto el contexto, pero la relación entre la niña y la nana, el niño muerto, esta cosa colonial.
Es que hay mucha, viste, cultura oral en esto.
Sí.
En el fondo.
Me quedé pensando como es como más como un inconsciente colectivo de las historias de Hacienda, ¿no? Como las historias de la Hacienda latinoamericanas, porque es tan parecida que hasta me pregunté si no había. Sí.
Se cuentan los chicos.
Sí. Pero un montón de paralelos.
Mira.
Sí. Pero como no la había visto y no he leído crítica nunca.
Claro.
Fue buenísimo.
Y creo
Fue
que
como
a nadie
verla.
se le ocurrió esa.
Ya. Porque es muy
Mira vos,
notorio.
voy a seguir la pista.
Sí,
esa.
échale un ojo, es muy notorio. Pero bueno, buenísimo.
Muy bien, ¿no?
Sí.
Dime, sí. Me encantó volver a verla en pantalla grande.
Sí, no, me encantó verla así. Chao, Jens, nos vemos por ahí.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I was glad the film kind of did such in there. People were really.
Yeah, I think we got into it. We showed some 3 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Just spread it out.
Yeah.